I think this is the strongest evidence yet that the dollar's done.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Hi there, my name is Shane Moran, and I'll be your host for this episode of Live from the Vault. And welcome to the show that goes beyond the headlines and uncovers the truth about the precious metals industry and the effects on the global economy in these historic times. Now, we have exclusive access to experts and insiders, and we reveal information right here. We reveal insights that you simply won't find anywhere else. Now, this week, we have the one and only Andrew Maguire, precious metals expert and whistleblower in the vault. And to help him pull back the curtain, we will be joined by a returning guest and by popular demand by you, our Live from the Vault community, Dr. Stephen Leeb, financial author and economist. That's right, Dr. Stephen Leeb is in the vault, and you're not going to want to miss a word of this conversation. But just before we introduce our featured guests and head over to the UK, please help keep spreading the word about this channel by hitting that like button. If you haven't already done so, go ahead right now, hit the like button, share this information so more people can become aware of the channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, you can do that right now. Click on the bell also if you want to be notified as each episode goes live. And so with that, if you haven't already met Dr. Stephen Leeb, he is an American economist, a financial author, wealth manager, and a publisher of over 8 books on micro or macroeconomics and the trends and finance and investment. He also has a newsletter. He's appeared on CNN, on Fox News, on NPR, on Bloomberg TV, just to name a few. And he's been called one of the country's foremost financial experts and one of the greatest long-term strategists of his generation. And with that, let's head over to the UK and talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire and our featured guest, Dr. Stephen Leeb. Over to you, Andy.
Well, I must say there are times when I feel really privileged because Dr. Stephen Leeb, and I know he doesn't want me to call him doctor, but I insist on giving him his full title. He's a very important guy.
No, just my wife can call me doctor. But I appreciate it, Andy. And I return it in back to you, as they say. I mean, same, my feelings toward you exactly the same. Thank you.
Stephen, I guess really obvious that the elephant in the room, let's just start with the elephant in the room, which is, and as far as we're recording this, basically on the 27th, basically. So obviously this will come out a bit later, but we've just witnessed the so-called Trump trade coming into play, and it's wrong-footed a lot of people. But you and I definitely know this is a very positive, bullish event. Stephen, please tell us what your thoughts are, because obviously people were looking at the gold price thinking, why is it selling off? Well, it wasn't. It was consolidating, getting the froth out. That's what I see. And now what we've seen is a pivotal, fresh, physically supported level built. So, Stephen, what's your thoughts?
No, Andy. I mean, you've been remarkable in terms of your prescience on where gold is going over the short term. I mean, it's like magic almost. I'm not kidding. They say things that you don't understand, appear like magic. And I don't pretend to understand what you understand about what's inside the gold market and what's, obviously I can see the manipulation. You have to be dumb as a dumb dog not to see the manipulation, but I don't know whether I would have seen it had it not been for you. But I sort of want to take a different tack. Yeah. It's really not a question of Trump. And I don't think it would have even been a question of Biden. I think the big event that we saw this week, and I felt this for a long time, that the turning point, that the inflection point in in world history, really. I think we've kind of been lucky to be alive at this particular moment in time, because I think this is a possible inflection point, and hopefully it'll go the right way. Now, I have to, before I go any further, there's a caveat. I mean, it could go terribly wrong. And by terribly wrong, I mean as wrong as can be. And I'll just leave it like that. I mean, there are people that are kind of crazy running this thing, and they're not the British. They're the Americans, period. The British, they have their faults. I mean, they're a little bit too deferential to the Americans, but they still have a very long culture, a very long history, and it might take them a little bit longer, but they definitely get it in the long term, and I'm really hoping that they come through at this point. Let me start with a quote I found by Eisenhower back in 1954, which really struck a chord with me. And if I can find it, this quote, this is what Eisenhower said. We used to, and I think we still do to some extent, say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag before school. That was when I was growing up. One of the first things we would do when classes started, when I was in second, third, fourth, fifth grade, whatever, we would say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And back in 1954, after the Cold War had gotten underway, we added the phrase "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance, and it was passed unanimously by both houses of Congress. And Eisenhower, in commenting on adding the phrase "under God," said, and I'm quoting, "In this way, we shall constantly strengthen those spiritual weapons which forever will be our country's most powerful resource in peace and in war." There you see it. You see spirituality as a primary aspect of American society, of American ethos. And that comes all the way from Jefferson. And this is Eisenhower, who obviously was, a war hero. I mean, he was head of the Allies, a 5-star general. I don't know, one of 2 or 3 in history, or 1 or 2. I don't know, 1 or 2, but whatever. I mean, it was a genuine hero. And believed spirituality was the most powerful thing you could possibly have. And you contrast spirituality, and I know I've made this point on the show before, with materiality. Materiality does not work. Materiality circuits itself. It's once materiality starts ruling your life, it produces anything but material progress, because everything is very short term, and you don't develop great inventions over the short term. It just doesn't happen. And through as I said before, basically, the country started failing when I think JFK was assassinated. A month after he was assassinated, incidentally, troops came home from Vietnam. He'd already signed the order. And those were the last troops to come home from Vietnam until we made peace, other than if they came home in caskets or their term had run out, etc. That was the end. That was the beginning of the end. The final end was when we took gold away from the monetary system. Gold, as I've pointed out, on many occasions, I have felt that gold, it wasn't just changing to a fiat currency, as bad as that is, and I don't think there's any history of a fiat currency ever working, but it was eliminating gold. I mean, this was a country, with the exception of wars, we were always on either a bimetallic currency or a gold current, or a gold bimetallic monetary system, or a gold monetary system. Now we were on a fiat monetary system, and things have not looked up since then. From that point, you can really trace the fall of America, and it's been accelerating. Now, this just to add to this, back in 1969, I published a book called Defying the Market. And I sort of talked a little bit about, it was counterintuitive, but I think it was, it was factually hard to accept, but it was true that technology had started to decline. And it was apparent that basically the kinds of technologies we had, whether it be pharmaceuticals, where we were still using antihistamines as psychotropic drugs, nothing, and still the case that the main treatment for Parkinson's is the same as it was 50 or 60 years ago when I wrote that book. It was 25 or 30 years ago, whatever. I mean, basically all our progress was in information technology. We're doing nothing in terms of materials. Yet here's China with been about $1.5 billion, 1.5 billion people. I have my mind too much on money, but 1.5 billion people entering the world. And we're going to need materials. I mean, yeah, information technology is great, but, Moore's Law was close to the end. Yes, we have managed to keep Moore's Law going by gerrymandering it. The real the most important aspect of Moore's Law is that it allowed a doubling in speed with each generation. That stopped in the early 20s. We're no longer doubling speed by making these very small transistors. I mean, when we make them smaller, yeah, it has some benefit. It may make them a little bit more energy efficient, but the heat is too intense. So their speed does not really increase. In fact, it may actually slow down. I mean, the high point for, speed in these kinds of circuits was probably around 2005. Okay, IT was sort of reaching kind of a block. I mean, it was not really a question of new technologies. If you think about it, it really hasn't been new technologies, at least since 2000. And I think before that, it was just new applications of existing technologies. And we figured sort of workarounds with speed and everything else. But at the same time, in 2000, China was entering the world, especially in 2001 when they signed the trade agreement. And Russia, Putin became president of Russia in 2000. What people don't realize, at least a lot of people, and I certainly didn't realize it until, within the last 5 years I did. But Russia during the 1990s experienced one of the worst decades that any major country has ever experienced, certainly in modern times, maybe in all time. Their life expectancy, despite there not being, a one-off event like like a plague, like the Spanish flu, which happened, there were no one-off expenses. It was just that the United States refused to help Russia. In the 1990s, we signed the agreement in 1987. Reagan and Simon negotiated the agreement. Part of it was that not a step further than East Germany. That's how far NATO would go. And we violated that. I mean, Clinton came along in 1997. And, incidentally, one of the real haters of Russia, and I don't hold this against them because it was easy to hate Russia during the Cold War. But this was a little out of the ordinary, was Biden. Senator Biden. I mean, there were debates in 1997 about extending NATO. And this was, a Clinton initiative. And no one was more for this than Senator Biden. And he argued very fiercely with people like Monahan. And New York Times even made fun of him. I mean, for doing it, said turning red-faced, walking around the Senate, taking people's time. And, how can you... this monstrosity called Russia, etc. And the U.S. had refused to help Russia after the Cold War had ended. Although they had said they would, they violated their pledges, or Simon's pledge, who was then, I think, the Secretary of State, or close associate, had a high position in the first Bush administration. And at the end of the 1990s, Russia's life expectancy had declined. Their major currency, in many cases, was vodka. You wanted a handyman to come in and he had to just fix the sink. It was a pint of vodka. If he had to fix the sink in the toilet, you gave him a quart. I mean, that was their currency. There was no currency in Russia. There was nothing in Russia. And you listen to people like Jeremy Sachs, who was one of our, best economists then and still is, I think. He was in charge of trying to bring up these former parts of the Soviet Union to, democratic institutions. And he did a very good job in Poland because he got a lot of help from the US. In Russia, he got no help at all. And they refused to lift a finger, refused to lend them money, refused to do anything. Though they were more than aware, the US was more than aware that Russia was enormously endowed with resources of all kinds. And they still have that endowment. Now, what I'm getting to is that throughout the 21st century that we're in right now, China and Russia, both with very, very long histories, both with histories that go back, well, in the case of China, some people say 7,000 years, that silk came out of China 7,000 years ago. Russia's been a Christian country with a kind of brutal interruption, as was the case with China. Russia's brutal interruption came in World War II with Stalin. And I think Stalin was more a crazy, paranoid individual and a monster. There's no doubt he was a monster, but there's also no doubt that he was very instrumental in the U.S. and the Allies, Britain, obviously, prevailing in the Second World War. I mean, 20 million Russians were lost in, I think, Stalingrad. It's now called Volgograd. China had their own horror show with Mao and the Cultural Revolution. I mean, my Lord, what went on there was just horrifying. But this really, in terms of their histories, these are really anomalous events. I mean, both China and Russia have very, very long cultures, and their cultures are basically spiritual. And some of that culture remain. That's how both countries survived. Now, for Russia, it continued. After Stalin, there was Khrushchev, who was probably the only reason he wasn't, not considered as much of a monster as Stalin, is he didn't have as much power. He wasn't there during the war, but he was pretty bad. But by the time Putin took charge of Russia, which was in 2000, and this is just my assumption, I think he was trained. I mean, very, very carefully trained. I mean, he's an exceptionally well-educated individual with a legal degree, as well as a degree in technical economics, some sort of engineering economics. And, if you've ever read a Putin speech, I don't speak Russian, but I have very close friends that do, and I read the translations. I mean, these are speeches that I wish we still had speeches like this in this country. I mean, I can quote you. Well, I don't want to get too carried away. Maybe later on. Anyway, Russia and China and new regime in China following Deng. It was sort of the Deng regime in China, and it was really Putin in Russia. And Putin had studied under the leading political scientist in Russia at that time, who had become mayor of, I think it was St. Petersburg or Moscow, and was just a real intellect. And both Putin and Medvedev studied under him. And as soon as Putin took charge, Russia changed almost overnight. Within 2 or 3 years, it was safe to walk in the streets. Before then, it was just like Escape from New York, except it was Escape from Moscow. Escape from New York was a movie about when New York just becomes a tyrannical town run by gangs. And that's what Russia was like. Putin shook things up very, very quickly and really took charge. I mean, Yeltsin was the kind of Russian, where the joke applied that if you're not drunk in the morning, then it's going to be a wasted day. I mean, that was sort of Yeltsin's philosophy. He wasn't much of a leader. I think he was chosen by the U.S. Putin wasn't. He was chosen by probably the former KGB, now they're called the FSB, I guess. He did a fabulous job in Russia, as did the Chinese. They've had several leaders, and I think the last one, Xi, has carried on. I mean, he had a major problem, in my opinion, that he had a real estate bubble that was threatening to blow up the country, and I think that's why he shut the country down for a year. I don't think he knew I don't think it was controllable. I mean, what happened in Japan. Japan never recovered. And I think that's one reason but that's speculation on my part. What is not speculation is that both these countries had spiritual backgrounds. They were, doesn't mean that they didn't appreciate material things or didn't aim for material things, but it meant that there was a spiritual aspect to their culture. I mean, Confucianism, virtue and Confucianism, which is, 3,000 years old, virtue comes from the heavens. And Russia, for at least 1,000 years, has been an Orthodox Christian nation. I don't know much about their monetary systems, but they basically were spiritual. I mean, it was part of their culture. And they went on a tear, both of them, in terms of technologies. And in little more than a century, that they had, China certainly had caught up and in some ways had passed us. Now it's clear that China is definitely number one in the world. And it's unimaginable, Andy, when you think of where the U.S. was in 1970 and 71, how far ahead we were in everything, military technologies. Bell Labs, which was the creator, was sort of a government adjunct, which was part of a monopoly called AT&T, which was broken up after the 1970s. I mean, what was more important, a big payday for the investment bankers that broke it up and basically destroyed Bell Labs, which is where all these innovations came, or continued innovations? I mean, up to the 70s, most of our research was either directly or indirectly financed by the government, not by corporations. After the 70s, that all changed. Everything became material, and material means that research is financed by corporations who depend on the next quarter. Incidentally, the curious exceptions to that were Buffett, who said, it's long term. That's my favorite holding period. Nice Midwestern born, sort of simple house in Omaha, which he still has. And he's also one reason you should stay away from the stock market. He's never had as much cash on hand as he has today. The other exception was kind of odd. It was Jeff Bezos. I mean, he said, if you're looking for short-term gains, forget about it. I mean, I'm interested only in the long term. Maybe Buffett was his idol. I have no idea about his background. But anyway, the point being, if you're going to be the dominant country in the world, you have to dominate in various ways. And we easily did it. We had by far the best technology in the world. I'm talking about circa 1970. I mean, what happened in such a short period of time, America went from this magnificent country on the top of the hill, a country that everyone could look up to, a country that accepted immigrants, a country that, that believed that men are created equal, at least spiritually equal, and had, certain unalienable rights. All these things went down the drain in such a short period of time. I mean, once people started focusing just on the short term, that short circuits itself. Transistor took, 20 years to come. I mean, these major inventions aren't born and created in a 2-year period. There's no time limit. Sometimes you get very lucky with penicillin. I mean, they were lucky, but they still took a long time to get it going as an antibiotic. But in science and in technology, the time frames are very long. And when you shut off those long-term time frames for the mistake for the purposes of materiality, you short circuit them. It's materiality short circuits itself. It stops advancing. How can it advance in a year or in sometimes a quarter? Why did you miss your number by 10 cents? I mean, that's a catastrophe. So when corporations started doing their own research, it was always short-term oriented. And that's kind of when technology stopped advancing in the US. In the meantime, you have these two countries, both of them, ironically, both of them, Andy, at the beginning of the 21st century. Now, that's not that long ago. I remember the clock turning to the 21st century where half the world thought that time was going to explode because, all the systems we had were not going to be adapted to, changing the millennium. I mean, it was the point I'm getting to is today, and it has been for, even Nature their last ranking of countries had China in front. China doesn't now it doesn't show off anymore. I mean, they stopped because they realized they were getting in a lot of trouble. Every time the United States found China had done something, they made it harder for them to do something else. But basically, they've gotten around, and I think that was a blessing for them because it forced them to even go faster. In Russia, Russia sort of went unnoticed because I don't know why. But, they didn't have the kind of meritocracy that China had. That was part of their culture, China. They're meritocratic.
Yeah.
We were now a clear number 2 or probably number 3 in technology.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, I don't follow the gold markets as close as you do. But I know that watching them, I watched the gold market open Sunday evening on one of these, monster selling gap down, then recovered. And by, I think, and I can't remember the exact times, around no earlier than I would say 8 o'clock, probably closer to 8:30, gold was holding decent gains. I've never seen such relentless selling in my life. And you may have. Because my observations are not anywhere near as sophisticated as yours. Some people can spot a fastball. I can't spot a fastball from an underhand pitch. In baseball, you guys don't play baseball in Britain, but it would be the same thing with soccer. I couldn't recognize Messi as a great soccer player or any of that. I watched the game. I know there's not too many goals scored. I mean, that's my take on gold. But as limited as my take is on gold, I can honestly say I have never seen the intensity of selling that I saw on Monday morning. And it was, Sunday night, and gold was up going into, the opening of the U.S. market. I mean, I think it was still up, though it was selling off really, really quickly. It just continued. There was no let up. It ended up down about $100. And I said, I've missed something. I mean, this has to be telling me something. I'll be very honest. I'll confess. I thought I had totally missed the boat on gold, that there was something really, really up. Because I'd see, I think you had said that there had been a lot of short covering. You had predicted the short covering, and you weren't around, or else I was if I had your phone number, I would have called you. What's going on, Andy? I mean, I was frightened. I didn't, I think fiat currencies has ruined this country. I want to see us get back to where we were in 1970. I want to see the West get back. I want to see the world get back. I mean, basically, we're all world citizens. If I have time toward the end, I'll read you another quote from Kennedy, which is a quote that I think that got him killed. But anyway, we're a world right now. We're no longer, our sovereignty. Yes, we should keep our cultures and we should keep our our beliefs, our spiritualities. We each believe in spirituality in different ways. That was what the second commandment told us. Thou shalt not worship graven images. Everybody should have their image of God in their head. Yeah, I mean, that's the purpose of the second commandment, really. It's sort of, money, love of money is the root of all evil. If everybody can see the God, if they're worshiping the same thing, it leads to trouble. Your spirituality is what makes you unique. It's not something that you can share with anybody. It's unique to you. It's why you can say all men are created equal, because spirituality is that quote I read from Eisenhower is what's key. It's what keeps ideas flowing. The fact that everybody is individual. Once everybody becomes the same, we're gone. Now, what I realized, it was sort of like an epiphany, maybe after 24 hours of thinking, I don't know whether I want to do this show or anything. I think I'm wrong. I realized, no, what I had seen was an act of utter desperation. Just utter desperation. This kind of selling either had to be born. I think my cat showed up with the mouse, which convinced me that the mouse had probably been cornered, and even a cornered mouse, well, not so much a cornered mouse, but a cornered rat, but this was a mouse. That desperation will cause this kind of reaction. I mean, I think that they were just panicked. They were selling whatever they, if you have to short it. I don't care. The dollar's at stake at this moment. The only thing we have remaining, I mean, as you know, I mean, it's, I think most people know, the only thing the U.S. really has remaining is control of the monetary system by this debt-ridden a country whose dollar is worth the paper it's printed on. I mean, the good trust of the United States.
I agree, but no, I totally agree, because what you witnessed, and I think it's important, what you witnessed was a constructed, it was basically fiat gold, i.e. Not gold,
right,
that was being sold. It was fiat gold. Now, while the Fed, and which is the only central bank on the planet Earth still fighting to gold as the benchmark against the dollar. So basically, what they were doing was literally this is not very bright. While the Fed can intervene and do openly intervene in the foreign exchange markets, dollar, yen, etc., and it's not a secret. It's an open story.
That's because of you. It's an open story.
Now, the trouble is, gold and silver are money. They're money, and they trade as a foreign exchange cross. So when the Fed makes the huge error, and this is a huge error, of selling gold in the foreign exchange markets against the dollar, i.e. buying the dollar, selling gold, in this desperate attempt to try and paint this illusion that they're not number one anyone, and you've really nailed it. Stephen, you've nailed it. So what they've done is really is dig a deeper hole, because what they're not everyone else, every single bullion bank I deal with, every institutional, every liquidity provider, every central bank, every sovereign is buying gold on every single day of the week. They are selling. Even UBS came out and said, they manage 1.7 trillion. And they said, you know what, we're actually recommending selling US treasuries to buy gold. I mean, the Swiss pension funds 2 weeks ago said, sell US treasuries to buy gold. Why? Because they need a hedge. Now, the Fed, when they made that mistake back in February of 2024, just before the Shanghai Futures Exchange launched. And what happened was they made a misstep. They did the same thing, but they went below the central bank bids at $2,000. What that did was force enormous. That meant that suddenly these guys are holding a paper gold position, which was 96% leveraged, and they suddenly had to go to the market. And we've got evidence of that. We even covered it in a last episode, which is basically that they borrowed money. They borrowed gold. They borrowed gold from the Bank of International Settlements. They only had 68 tons short at that point. They went up to 178 tons. And then they realized this gold was actually being bought by the global South banks, the BRICs banks, and saying, give it to me, baby, just give it to me. And they suddenly had to, for the first time in history, they had to cover into the all-time highs. They had to buy back the shorts, the swaps that this gold they bought from the Bank of International Settlements to try and tamp down the price of gold was immediately sucked into the global South. And they had to cover their shorts into the highs of the range, right up to $2,800. Yeah, we've had a bit of a pullback. It is just the froth. It is the froth getting rinsed. It's this 96% leverage froth that is getting rinsed out. Good riddance to it, because we've just forged a brand new bottom and a central bank physical bottom.
I think, Andy, and you may not agree with this, but I think this is the strongest evidence yet that the dollar's done.
Yeah.
The dollar is done. I mean, whether or not we have a failed auction or not, I mean, it's up to the Fed. Does the Fed want to buy an entire auction of Treasury securities? I mean, it's not going to save them. I mean, what you've seen right now, look, something occurred to me too. How obsessed this country is with money. As you look, I basically like Elon Musk in a way. I think he's a very, very wealthy man, but he's also has a certain amount of spirituality. But I think he's kind of losing that. And that really does upset me a lot, because he's somebody, he didn't have to pay an arm and a leg for Twitter. I mean, he did this because he was trying to protect free speech. I mean, who can blame him for being, he's rich. It doesn't, I'm not against people being rich as ever, as long as they have spirituality and we're still pulling the oars in the same way. I'm just against the deep state who's pulling the oars against us.
Yeah.
You were speaking of UBS recommending dumping treasuries for gold. Good idea. I mean, gold's going to soon surpass the dollar anyway. Once gold gets to, 3,500, there's some number where the combination of increased buying plus price rises will make it more important as a currency than is the dollar. And I can't stress to have that spirituality, which gold represents. Gold is a store of wealth. You don't carry gold around with you to pay for a pack of gum or to pay for a Mercedes. Hey, I bought this bar of gold with me in my suitcase. Will you exchange it for a Mercedes? How many people have ever done that? No one. But, what they've set up in BRICs, I just want to make one last comment, which has always troubled me. And I, when I was trying to work it out back in, when I was writing this last book, which was probably sometime in 2018, 2017, I saw this kind of thing happening. And I saw that I didn't see it in this kind of detail where they'll have a payment system. Incidentally, as soon as they announced the payment system, HSBC was the first to raise their hand. We'll facilitate all the trades that the BRICs wants to do through the payment system. But the ultimate thing is that gold represents 40%. it doesn't represent 80 or 90 or 100. It represents 40%. It's 40% backed by gold. That's enough.
Yep.
But it's also enough to let gold be free trading.
Yep.
So it's no longer a deflationary asset. See, in the old days, you could produce enough gold so that you would add to the stock, and that would be sufficient to allow for growth. And, you know, if you had a bimetallic system, even better, because you'd have more silver. But now, gold for a while is going to, in my opinion, probably outperform silver. But silver is going to catch up. If you're long-term oriented, if you're leaving, you know, gift to your, which I have to think about, to, you know, my progeny would be silver, I think.
Stephen, it's being priced, and this is the inflection point. It's being priced now in physical exchanges across the globe, in China, in Russia, the BRICs nations are pricing gold. Now, this is what we're discussing here. I guess the bottom line of this is that we're talking about a unipolar hegemon called the US trying to stop a multipolar world to develop. And we're talking, Stephen, you're talking about spirituality. Yes, nothing's perfect here, but we're talking about our age-old enemies, people who never got on before, taking down barriers, realizing it's better to get on together and to trade together and to grow together than to fight each other. There's only one problem in this world, and it's because the Bank of International Settlements, who really diverged from the Fed and said, enough of this stuff, we're settling all our synthetic gold positions, we're buying gold.
Then they tried to back out, but it was too late because China controlled the technology.
Yep.
I mean, they said that, you know, we're not going to, you know, support Enbridge if it's going to allow, you know, sanctions. And Too late. Didn't make any difference because Enbridge was China's product. That was their technology. So it didn't make any difference at all.
And they haven't stopped it because, look, what are we witnessing? Stephen, what we're witnessing, go back to the 1st of March, when strategically the Shanghai Futures, when the PBOC launched the Shanghai Futures Exchange. And what we've seen since then is an $800 rally, not driven by speculation purely, because they realized what they were doing here is that by launching that, yes, there was some speculative interest in there, but by strategically keeping it at each strategic step higher, the physical market caught up. And that's where the central bank institutional bids started to come in. So really what we've seen is a by stealth gold price revaluation happening right under our noses. And the only central bank, the Fed, the only central bank that hasn't yet capitulated, but are capitulating, are folding their hand, is happening under our noses. And as you say, there was what we saw on Monday was fiat gold. This is, yes, it was a kickback. Yes, you named it.
But the difference between you and I, you realized this a lot sooner than I did. It took me, you know, a day of wondering what in the hell happened. And then finally, waking up to what happened was utter desperation.
Yeah.
You realized that earlier. I mean, to you, Monday was probably, you know, okay. I don't think you probably you didn't sweat. You probably didn't sweat at all. I mean, looking at the market down $100 probably didn't bother you. I'm guessing. That would be my guess because.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, that was just simply a simple equation. It is so simple. It is how many paper market 96% leveraged positions have to be squared into central bank buying levels. And so it's limited to that equation, nothing else. So therefore, because you can only supply so much fiat gold before everyone says, give it to me, baby. And I will, the minute that you take it out of the back door, of the COMEX, it becomes NSFR compliant, first tier asset class, competing with US treasuries. And then immediately it is deliverable. and that they're draining the very resource, that they're draining the Fed of its only power. And literally, this is game over.
Yes.
It is not going to stop. Gold is going to rise another $500 in short order. It cannot be stopped because China is heading up the BRICs platform to revalue gold, and it's happening under our noses. And Glasnev's gold-backed currency is, even though everyone thought that the unit, the BRICS unit, is being put to the sidelines. Yeah, it's been put to the sidelines. It's still there. And in the meantime, you think Russia's sitting back? Russia, well, yeah, but Russia's not sitting back. They're already trading gold. They already have enough gold between Russia and China to support a global commodity currency. And it is going to happen.
They do. And Andy, just one quick point that I wanted to make about gold and silver. Right now, I know you make this point about the ratio, which is enormous. I agree. And silver is a very, very valuable metal. But in today's context, just today's context, when you've got to get rid of this fiat currency, which is holding back our sciences and everything else, I mean, it's making a mess of this world. I mean, again, I just want to quote briefly from Jefferson. I mean, I found a better quote than the ones I was using about men created equal. He said, all men are entitled to laws of nature, equal access to the laws of nature and nature's God. Now, what that is saying, science and the God that made science. That's what he's saying. Two different things, but they're entitled to the latest science and, respect for the God that made science. We don't have the latest science in this country. This is another problem with materiality. Our leaders think they're gods. If you try and get a grant that demonstrates that messenger RNA finds its way into retroviruses, which it does, the chances of you getting that grant is about the chances of me beating Usain Bolt by 10 strides in a 100-yard dash. Okay. I mean, I can't walk 100 yards. I mean, it's money. It's all money that controls our sciences. Even Nature published articles that were governed by money. They were paid to publish. It's crazy. Ironically, I just have to make this ironic point. The only Wall Street gets this is monetary. I mean, they're the creature, the beneficiary of all this money. That's why Tesla's worth $330 billion right now on Wall Street. In the stock market, BYD is probably worth 1/100th, 1% of the value of Tesla, but it's a much better car. Now, that doesn't make sense. That's money talking. I mean, but Wall Street does get it in one sense. Moderna and Pfizer are both, Moderna has sunk 90%, and Pfizer is fighting 20-year lows or 10-year lows. I mean, and they were, the makers of this vaccine. That this country doesn't get the best science. One thing I'll say about China and Russia, I mean, I can't say everyone in China and everyone in Russia, because there are a lot of poor people in both these countries, remarkably poor. Mm-hmm. But they do get the best science if they can, they're entitled to it. The best science that science can make. The laws of nature. The higher they can raise them, the better their health. That, United States per capita, let me just tell you something. I mean, forget about everything else. I don't have any answers. I'm not a biologist. I'm just a common sense kind of guy. I don't understand what you say about, gold and all this, the over-the-counter stuff that you understand so thoroughly. I mean, no, I don't. I pay attention to what you say. I want your bottom line. But anyway, it's our sciences they're just bought by money. Pharmaceuticals. I've just discovered vitamin D is probably the best immune drug you can take, and it's almost impossible to overdose. Now, I will tell you something. I sit here at 78, a cancer survivor. My last blood test was the best blood test I have ever had. And I'm going back to my 20s. And everything was in the middle. What did I do? I started taking a lot of vitamin C and many other supplements that I learned about from your John Campbell. Do you know who John Campbell is? I mean, he's a guy that does these health videos. I mean, he's a guy, if I were qualified to nominate someone for canonization, he'd be my first pick. He's done the world a great service. And, it's one reason why Scotland's having these debates right now about, COVID. We're not, if I were to use COVID in a blog, I mean, I think I'd be censored immediately. You should see read the Wikipedia pages in this country. People that were heroes and fabulous doctors that saw things wrong, now they're considered villains, misinformants. They should be put in jail. I mean, this is nuts what's going on, Andy. And that's why I want to see one world where we can progress science, where we can have renewable energies, that maybe one day we will be able to colonize the stars. I mean, it's colonize other galaxies. It's not an Ali G thing.
I have to say, obviously, and I want people to listen to everything you're saying now. What we're saying, though, is what do we, people listening to you, watching you now, what can they do to take responsibility for themselves and get ahead of this curve as all this dust settles, as sense starts to go, as education wises up people who are no longer watching mainstream media and are listening to sages like yourself? What they must do, surely, is access gold, silver. It is the only, and we're talking about the only real money that cannot be debased by these fools that are messing with fiat.
Right. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Kinesis is, I think, probably the best thing you can do. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a guest and I see that seeing the Kinesis on your T-shirt makes me more convinced. I mean, you're a guy that risked your life to out these people. I mean, that means a lot, Andy. And, their whole platform, the problem with Kinesis is that it's such a good way of doing it that it's a pain in the neck to do it, which is fine with me. I mean, but I wish they would make it easier. They would, be able to have, the two things at once, make it easy to go in. But I understand. I mean, it took me, I think, a month, and it wasn't that much. It was 6 figures or something that I transferred. But you should see the arguments we got from our bank. I mean, my Lord, you think we were bank robbers. I mean, we've had accounts there for I mean, this is JP Morgan. I mean, from what I understand, it's BAC that's going short. I mean, you mentioned one time with one of your episodes that there are trillions of dollars involved in this. This is not just what I honestly think that they've been manipulating oil. I mean, the oil prices haven't made sense for at least a couple of years. I mean, why is oil trading at whatever it is? I'm looking at it now. Brent at $72. When Iran is on the verge of a war that we're going to lose it with Iran. I mean, it's like it's crazy to have a negative premium associated with that. Really, literally, that's what we have, a negative premium associated with oil. Again, it's fiat. Everything is fiat in the U.S. Is there anything that's backed 1-to-1 or 50-to-1? Well, I guess stocks are, but that's meaningless because, the central, this is what, just one last comment. This is why quantitative easing works so well. It works so well because all the money ended up in the banks. They bought the bonds from the banks and then they gave the banks the money. Now, who are the banks going to lend the money to? They're going to lend them to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have $100,000 family income and decide they want to buy a castle in Spain? Or are they going to lend them to a hedge fund, which has several $billion? The hedge funds got incredibly wealthy, and all the money managers got, this money didn't find its way into the economy. It found its way into the stock market. And that's why you have Tesla valued at $330 billion and you have BYD at maybe 300 million. I mean, it's crazy. The science, the markets, everything, the military. This could be a wonderful world, Andy. And just one comment about silver, because I know that silver is very important to you and it's so important to other people. Right now, at this moment, gold is a much more important metal than silver, because gold is going to be the backing of the world's currency. It's going to be the center of the world's monetary situation. It has more spirituality than any other metal, including silver. Silver's a second. I'll give it that. But gold, I mean, I could go on for another couple of hours of why it's so magic. I mean, it's the electrons. It has the wrong electron in a place. I mean, the physics are indicative of that, of a higher power. Only that. I mean, it's so special in so many ways, not just ostensibly special because of how far you can stretch it, but it has spirituality all over it. I mean, even people, like I mentioned before, Weil, the brighter of the two, Andre Weil, won a Fields Medal, but Simone was probably brighter. He used to send her letters talking about his mathematics. I mean, but anyway, she recognized it, reluctantly recognized how important gold was because it's a store of value. Once gold reaches a certain level where it can back up a world currency, it's not going to go up that much anymore. It'll still go up, but it's not going to go up nearly as fast or as much. It's not going to be needed because it's backing up a currency. It's a store of value. And that has tremendous value right now when we don't have stores of value, when a store of value is a piece of paper that's backed up by the good faith of a bankrupt country. I mean, that's, yes, in that context, its store of value is it's spiritual, it's critical for world survival. But once it gets to a point, silver is going to be like it's going to be a skyrocket.
Oh, I agree. And silver will also be revalued. And silver,
I mean, much more. Silver
it
could
is
go
simply, it is so undervalued. It's a 4-year supply deficit. It is being gamed like it's paper. And yet it's now flowing into the physical settled exchanges. But
Andy, there's a question that I wanted to ask you. I've always wanted to ask you this because I have no idea why. Why were they so intent on holding silver down in value? Gold, I understand very clearly.
Oh, because of bets. It's because of not just the derivative bets on the COMEX. They're small compared to, if you go to the Office of the Comptroller report and you look at the 5 banks that are short precious metals, a big chunk being silver, you're talking about billions of offside positions that have to be squared. There isn't the silver to do that. Now, the above ground silver that is there, that they're beginning to leach out and get rid of, has to now go to the mines to get it. And silver will explode because you won't be able to cap it anymore.
I think it's going to be a skyrocket. I think, especially once gold has its position established, silver is going to be the best performing asset in the world, in my opinion.
It will. And that takes us on to one last thing is you have one thing that excites me in your country is the sound money movement. It is very strong. It is growing. But here's the thing. Gold and silver is going to be classified as money again. But you can't take a piece of gold down to the shop and shave a bit off. So this is where we think you need to digitize it in an allocated form to know that you have then a piece of this gold that you can trade for a coffee or a Learjet. It doesn't matter. But the point is, it's real money that can't be debased. And the minute that you take your fiat and digitize it into a secure, safe haven asset class like gold and silver, and it's now locked out of the fiat system, you then can spend that at the supermarket, you can spend it anywhere, and you can pay your bills with it.
From the Bible to our sciences, I mean, gold is at the center. Gold is just so special, and silver follows. I mean, these, yes, and you have to have it.
But thank you. I have to thank you for joining us. And I wish we could just, if you and I were sitting down now, we would get a glass of wine out and we would just be talking until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. In the meantime, I have to thank you.
Andy, there'd be a difference after a point, after I've sort of talked a lot. I mean, I'd have to listen to you very carefully and ask you 100 questions before I would, really understand what you understand. What I understand is common sense. That's what all I'm good at is like putting the ideas together. But the nitty gritty, you're the best by far. I mean, the world owes you a debt. I mean, literally outing these people. I mean, I'm not just saying that to compliment you or anything else. I'm just saying it as something that's a fact.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much. And as I say, we'll get this out. We'll get your links out. We'll get this out. It'll actually be not this week, next week, and then and I'm sure we'll share that. It'll be shared widely. But thank you so much, Stephen, for sparing us your valuable time.
All right. Thank you, Andrew Maguire and Stephen Leeb, for that amazing discussion here. And remember, to our Live from the Vault community, buy physical and make sure it's backed 1-to-1, and understand the difference between what Andy affectionately calls the casino paper gold and silver markets and the actual physical gold and silver markets. They're not the same. Don't be fooled. And there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for you today on another episode of Live from the Vault. Please help keep spreading the word about this channel by hitting that like button. If you haven't already done so, hit the like button right now. Share this information so more people can find out about the channel, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. But if you click on that bell right there, you'll be notified in real time as each episode goes live. And with that, we'll see you right here next time on Live from the Vault. See you then.